Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the story of you through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, producer of the show. We are thrilled to have you here with us today. We hope you had a fantastic holiday season, a great Christmas, a great New Year's. And here we are celebrating a brand new year, kicking off the first Typology show of the year, and we're so glad that you're here with us. We're also really excited because Ian launched his brand new book on the 28th of December. If you haven't gotten that book yet, go get it. It's a really great one. I've read it multiple times now. You're going to love this book, The Story of You. There's so many fun things that are going to be happening this year. I am stoked for 2022. Hey, we've got two great guests for you today. 7 Wing 8, 7 Wing 6, Nathan and Joy Clarkson. They are siblings. Joy is a scholar, author, podcaster, and storyteller. And Nathan is an award-winning actor, best-selling author, filmmaker, podcaster. And they have a brand new project, a book, The Clubhouse. Open the door to Limitless Adventure. Hey, listen, who better to tell us about a limitless adventure and limitless possibilities than two Enneagram 7s? Hey, again, we're really happy that you're here. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now, here is the host of our show, Ian Cron.
Nathan and Joy Clarkson, Enneagram 7s, both of you, brother and sister. Joy, scholar, author, host of Speaking with Joy, the podcast and storyteller. Nathan, award-winning actor, best-selling author of the memoir Different and the memoir Good Man, and the upcoming book by the two of you, The Clubhouse. Wow, that was a mouthful, Anthony.
We were just talking before we got on here. This is our first set of siblings.
It is. And did you hear their CV? It's like so long, we just have to close the show now. It's like we took all of our time describing their credits.
In post, we'll be rolling the music right now. See you later, folks.
That's great.
Boy, we had a great time with Nathan and Joy, didn't we? They were really something. I loved it. Again, like Anthony said, first time siblings on the show. Not often do you get siblings of the same type, the Enthusiast, on the same show, and I want to dive into that. What the heck was your house like growing up with two 7s banging around, probably like pinballs?
That's a good question. And funnily enough, there's a little story that goes with why we might be 7s. I was about, 6 years old, I think. No, I was 5. I was 5 years old, and I told my mom I really wanted a little sister, and she was 42 at the time and says, "Oh, honey, no, that's not going to happen." And at the same time, she was trying to teach me, because she was a good Christian mother, the power of prayer. And so I said, well, I'm going to start praying for a little sister. And, she didn't want to ruin my understanding of God and prayer and these things. But she didn't know how to let me down until this isn't going to happen. So I started praying every day. And lo and behold, a few weeks later, she was pregnant with Joy. So I think God endowed Joy with my personality so I could have someone to hang out with who got me. But Joy and I are the class clowns and the fun. I hate to say that, but we're the fun people of the family, but we're also the youngest boy and youngest girl. So honestly, It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, and I feel like with a name like Joy, I was bound to be a 7, right? Like, what would I do? What would I do if I wasn't a 7? What would I done if I was just a really depressive type? No, I think Nathan and I were the extroverts of the crowd, and it's fun because we express our 7-ness and our enthusiasticness in very different ways. But we definitely brought a lot of energy and a lot of verbal. Our family was fairly verbal and intense anyway. We bring a lot of kind of Scotch-Irish wit, enthusiasm, and temper. And so you might think that Nathan and I brought the intensity, and I would say we brought the energy, but the intensity was already there.
What's the landscape of the family? Do you know what the other numbers might be?
So my dad would be a 5, right, Nathan?
Yeah, I think so. That makes sense.
I'm not exactly sure what my mom is. We were talking about this yesterday.
I think she could be a 4, a 1, an 8.
Yeah, I would say, I don't think an 8. I think she's a 4 or a 1 because there's a strong ideals center. Yeah, I think she might be a 1. And then my sister is definitely a 4. And then our other brother is, I think, a 2. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So we're kind of all over.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
you're covering the spectrum of types almost,
Mm-hmm.
We're trying. Yeah.
Let's get the Duggars on the show. Can we do that? Because we got to get every single type out of that group, right?
I'd love to come back for that one if I can. That'd
Right.
be fun to watch.
And we get some hillbilly humor out of that, no doubt, right?
Right. Yeah.
Love to probe into the Duggar psyches. That would be something to behold. Multi episodes for that one.
Right.
Maybe a whole season. All right. Now you guys grew up. You loved using the Myers-Briggs did you do that as a family? Was that like something the family was into?
Yeah,
so my dad was a certified tester. Like you have to when you do like the like actual training with the MBTI Institute. So he did that, and he would do like workshops. We would have nights where everybody'd come over and talk about it. And so it was a big deal.
Well, it was also something I think that was a big part of our family dynamic, because we did have 4 kids. And I know that's not tons and tons, but I'd say nowadays 4 kids is a lot. And I think it really gave us this grit and understanding for understanding the unique and sides and differences between all of us. And that was something we grew up with. So it wasn't so much, we learned how to understand that each other had differences, and those were good and worthy of being celebrated. So I think it really helped us both self-learn and others learn as we grew up, having these kind of grids of personality understanding. So that was something, I really loved it.
And I think also, as our parents were trying to help us get along, there was a lot of, which I really appreciate, there was the strong impulse for self-awareness and a desire to be like, sometimes when your siblings do things that you don't enjoy, it's not because they're specifically trying to hurt you or annoy you. It's because
they're bad.
Or they're bad. It's just because people are different and we all relate differently, which is, I think, really helpful, because that can, keep certain personality types just from feeling like they are bad to exist. But I think our family we're kind of odd when you think about it this way, but like around the dinner table, there's kind of 3 things you'll talk about: art, film, books, words. We do a lot of like vocabulary, and I don't know how you can discuss words. We do that. And then talking about personalities and kind of trying to think about what makes us tick, why we love what we love. And
cool.
That was helpful for me, because I grew up with a lot of learning disabilities and mental illness that got diagnosed very early. So having that understanding of celebrating differences rather than being ostracized or shamed because you fall outside of this familial or even cultural norm was really important for me as a young kid, to kind of grasp this idea of we're made uniquely. And so that was something that was really beneficial to a young kid who had learning disabilities and mental illness. So I love the idea of these things, these tests that can help us understand, and even more than that, celebrate ourselves.
All right, so let's just pop in on that for a second. You in your material, you talk about being neurodivergent, and I'm curious to know how an Enneagram 7 navigates a world in which they feel so different. And I'm making a guess here that you probably experienced some measure of social suffering as a result. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, I can. It's not an isolated incident that multiple teachers have yelled at me in front of entire classes of people, and I was sitting there not knowing why this was happening. So this was something that happened pretty regularly.
Okay, so talk to us a little bit about what neurodivergent means, and how did you navigate as a 7 early on suffering?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I've ever had that one posed on a podcast before. How did I navigate suffering? As neurodivergent is people who diverge from the typical, the norm, the kind of understood and expected way of thinking and viewing the world. And that, there's all sorts of different labels that can take in different ways it can go. For me, I was diagnosed with OCD very early on, ADHD, ODD, a lot of things. And then later on was diagnosed with depression and dyslexia. I could go on. The list is really, really long on the things I was diagnosed with. But the way that looked practically in the life of a young kid, especially one who loved people, loved connection, loved expressing himself, loved all these things, is it made me, I experienced the grief in feeling alone and separated And I'd say that one of the things I look back and that affected me most was feeling inherently bad and feeling inherently wrong. And this was not for my family. Thank goodness I had a family who celebrated me and loved me. But in any situation outside of the context of my family, I felt I began to notice at a young age, oh, I'm different. And I don't know, I can't do these, I can't read like this person. I can't understand this problem like this person in school. I don't know how to stop talking when everyone else seems to be able to. I don't know how to stop fighting or questioning or asking questions. And that seems to bring me a lot of trouble. And so I found myself as a kid feeling wrong, like the central part of who I was wrong. And I guess as I'm trying to think about how I processed pain, I think a lot of times I didn't, to be honest. It was something that I just chose not to. And obviously that has negative repercussions later on in life, but I learned to a little bit live with my dukes up and learned how to take one on the jaw. And I would say that processing pain was not and is not my strength. So yeah, that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah.
I wonder, as a sibling watching you, you were exceptionally creative. And sometimes I feel like that was I don't know if that was an outlet, but it.
Yeah, that's a good, I don't think I knew I was processing pain in the context of creativity, but you're right. I did find solace and joy in my creative pursuits, especially ones that revolved around narrative, around story. And when I would look at stories, when I look at as a kid, I loved Superman, I loved Batman, I loved the heroes. And those were the places, I guess, yeah, Joy, you're right. That's a good insight, that I found comfort inside these stories because they gave me an arc to look at and one where I could place myself and have a future that envisioned hope for me if I could identify with these characters that went through their own battles. That's a really good insight.
That's good because sevens are future oriented, right?
Yes.
In terms of time.
Yeah, absolutely. 3s, 7s, and 8s are their orientation to time is the future. 4s, 5s, and 9s, their orientation to time is the past. 1s, 2s, and 6s, their orientation to time is the present. And when you know that, by the way, it provides you with a lot of insight into why oftentimes people don't get along. If you're married and you are married to a person with a different time orientation, once you know that, it really explains some of the rub that can happen in the relationship, right? Because your particular orientation to time, you will unconsciously assume is the right one. It's the normal one. And so that means it gives you leash to judge someone whose orientation to time is different. And that, of course, doesn't end well. Ends in tears for everybody, as they say. It's interesting. You're both storytellers and interested in story. You know that the communication style for 7s is storytelling, right?
I do now.
So every type has a communication style. So for 1s, it would be, teaching. When not careful, it devolves into preaching. 2s, how should I say it? Like 3s would be promotion and marketing. 4s would be lament. 5s, symposium is what we say.
Wow.
6s, catastrophizing. 7s, storytelling. 8s, barking. Authority is a word we use sometimes. And 9s, it's called epic saga. And so anyway, it's no surprise to me that both of you are storytellers, because that's sort of your natural zone as a 7. And going back to you, Nathan, I think that there would be similarities to every type, I guess, as to how they navigate or integrate suffering early in life, right? But the 7 typically would retreat into the headspace, right? And they would very much retreat in. They would create something of a neverland. And so 6s kind of cope with the world, their anxiety, and you have OCD, which is sort of an anxiety-based disorder. And, I think that with all that anxiety, 7s tend to cope with anxiety by creating a world of unlimited possibilities and fun and story, and everything seems to be shimmering to the 7, right? With possibility.
Yeah, possibility everywhere.
Yes, everywhere, right?
And that's where the hope lays too, in the possibility.
Yes. And so a 6 copes in many ways with anxiety through pessimism, and the 7 with optimism. Anthony!
Ian,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, brother.
You know what I do every year at this time?
Tell me.
I turn my focus to fitness and I start setting resolutions to get healthy.
Oh, the New Year is always a good time for a reset.
For me, I like a routine I can stick with, like what time of day I work out, or whether I'm going to walk or cycle that day. But doing the same thing over and over gets dull and can make it difficult to stay motivated.
Oh, I totally get that. It's so much easier to stick to your goals when you get to mix it up.
Right? It is. And that's why I love Peloton.
Ooh.
Have you ever tried the Peloton bike?
I have not, but I've been wanting to.
All right. Well, right after this, let's leave the studio. I'll go over to the house. We'll go upstairs to the workout room, and I'm going to let you ride my Peloton bike.
Woohoo! I'm glad I wore my sweats.
It's amazing.
Well, tell me more.
There are so many new and exciting classes to explore on the Peloton. They've got a workout for every goal, every day, and mood, so I can de-stress from a long day with 30 minutes of strength and 20 minutes of cardio, or I can do a quick 15-minute total body class when I get up in the morning.
Oh, that sounds great.
Now, you know I do yoga, right?
Yoga!
Well, I love the variety I get with their instructors, and I always finish feeling refreshed. Now listen to this.
Tell me.
They're even rolling out additional great new things in 2022, like their new artist series music selections. Get this, you can choose the music of a single artist for an entire class.
Now that's really cool.
They have over 100 artist series to choose from. I can't wait to find my favorite music to keep me motivated. And guess what, Anthony?
What?
They've got a special offer to kick off the new year.
Oh, tell us about it.
For a limited time, try the Peloton app free for 2 months. Then $12.99 a month after. New members only. Visit onepeloton.com/app to learn more. That's 2 months free at onepeloton.com. Offer expires 1/31/22. Terms apply. And so a 6 copes in many ways with anxiety through pessimism, and the 7 with optimism. Does that ring true in your experience?
Yeah, it does. I think when I mentioned earlier that in processing my pain, it wasn't something I wanted to do. I'd rather find a way to move forward, to look forward, to hope for tomorrow. And it's interesting hearing about the communication types, because that resonates with me so strongly, that I communicate. I even think my whole interior world, my mind, is in the context of narrative and story. Everything I see is a part of the story. And interestingly enough, my OCD triggers revolve around things that don't fit the narrative of my story how they should.
Ooh.
If you imagine yourself in a movie, I'm going, this thing doesn't fit in this scene. This person doesn't belong here. That shouldn't have been said. And so my triggers always revolved around things that didn't fit the narrative of the life and the story I wanted to live. So that's really interesting.
So, Joy, as you think about your life as a 7, and by the way, I'm also curious, are you like maybe an ENTP?
Yeah, well done.
Yeah. What about you, Joy?
I tend to come out as an EN and then stronger FJ, but I can kind of sometimes vacillate on the T and the F and the P and the J.
Yeah, I would imagine vacillating on the T and the F would be true if you're a 7. Fs, I don't want to stereotype, but often fall into that heart triad. But I would say a lot of times with 7s, they sort of fall in that ENTP space. And there's some literature out there correlating Enneagram types with Myers-Briggs types, and which is kind of fascinating, all speculative, but interesting to read about, you know? And now both of you mentioned early before we started recording about the importance of self-knowledge and self-awareness and learning about who we are and why we are and wrestling with large existential questions. Joy, talk to me about that in your life?
Well, I think I'll talk to you about it in my life right now. Okay. I'll zoom in on though I am a future-oriented person, right now I'm in this space where I just submitted a PhD and I'm looking at what are the choices I'm making. And when I think about that, for me, what feels really important is knowing why you make the decisions you make. And a lot of that boils down to what you want, what you're afraid of, and being able to kind of pinpoint those things and not try to control them, but just kind of be aware of what's orienting me in the world and what makes me move towards certain things when I'm in a place of stress or of disintegration. That I think that's for me has been one of the most important things about self-reflection, whether it's with Enneagram or just kind of prayer and being thoughtful or with Myers-Briggs, is thinking about what motivates me in the world. So like when I'm in a happy, good place, I am I love to dig in deep. I think correct me if I'm wrong, but 7s in a good place become kind of scholarly and excited and deep and
like disciplined. 5s, right? You go to the high side of 5.
And so I like to think that I'm incredibly healthy because I've gone into academics. Clearly that means that I've just, really maxed out. But what's funny is that when I first encountered the Enneagram, this is kind of me getting off on a trail. When I first encountered the Enneagram, it was actually in grad school, and it was a whole bunch of my friends were really into it. And they were like, "Oh, you're for sure a 1," which I don't think you're supposed to tell people what number they are.
No.
So that was definitely not, and I remember reading it thinking, I'm not this. But as I started to kind of read through the Enneagram and think about what number I was, and I read the 7 and I thought that's what I am, I thought, oh, well, of course they thought I was a 1. I was in a super stressed, not healthy place in my life.
Right.
And I think having the awareness of what motivates me, what do I love, what do I fear, but also what does it look like when I'm not healthy? Having those tools for kind of evaluating a scale of growth is really helpful so that you're making good choices and that you're moving forward and that you're not kind of being ruled by disintegrated fears and unadmitted desires.
That's really great. Are you drawn to the mystics?
Oh, for sure.
That's a very 7 quality.
Yeah.
Really 7 quality. There's a particular type of 7 that is really drawn to the mystics and to mystical experience and even, I don't know if I would say the contemplative life, though some are, but there are a lot of sort of 7 mystics. St. Francis would be a perfect example of a 7 mystic,
St. Francis was a 7.
Yes.
This makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, total 7 behavior all over the place, and I wrote a book about Francis, so he's one of my favorite all-time historical figures.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's interesting.
It makes me think of with the connection with mystics, because I think people often think of mystics as like very, demure and serious and, and not that 7s can't be serious, but there's this kind of pull toward future, towards optimism, towards hope. And it makes me think of, so when you said, are you into the mystics? I wanted to be like, well, which one? Because there are many that I love. But
be specific.
But I would say, but one of them is, I think it was Teresa of Avila that said, God save me from the gloomy saints. And that there was this sense of like, I love it in Teresa, but in Julie, and also of this like need to reckon with the darkness of the world because we have that kind of fear, pain and everything, but then to find the beauty or the joy or the gold at the heart of existence.
Mm-hmm.
And that I don't know, that seems to me to be something I'm very drawn to.
Looking for the pony, as we might say in common parlance, right? Looking for the pony. So how, in your experience, if I had your parents on here, right, and I said to them, how do you raise 7s? What would they say?
That's a good question. I did write a book about what it's like to grow up as a 7, and from my mom's perspective, what it's like to raise a 7. But in going off the themes that we explored there, I think one thing that was always difficult for me, it still really is, I chose a life of an actor and a writer and a filmmaker where I get to choose everything I do, and no one's telling me what to do ever, which is, I think, something that has a lot to do with it has everything to do with my personality. But I'd say knowing that about myself and about this type how do I say it? I don't want to be cliche, but it's giving them room to be themselves. It's giving them room to explore who they want to be. It's giving them room to live outside of the box and be celebrated for that, rather than imposing preconceived grids and notions and boundaries. I'm not talking about training. I'm not talking about discipline. Those are important things. I'm talking about expectations of personality or what life should look like, how they should act. Let them live into and explore their own personhood, even if it doesn't look like what culture, church, family expects or thinks it should.
Anthony?
Yes.
You know the new year is always a great time to discover new things about ourselves and our interests, right?
Absolutely.
Well, just as it's important for us as adults to learn new things, it's important for the kids in our lives to make these same discoveries. With a KiwiCo subscription, kids can discover something new all year long. Through hands-on art and science projects, kids can discover the engineering and mechanics behind everyday objects, the science behind the chemistry of cooking, geography, new cultures, and brand new art and design techniques.
This is so cool.
Our assistant, Wendy, she has 2 young boys, 8 and 10, right?
Yes, she does.
They love their screen time, but they get so excited when they receive their new kit each month. The day the box arrives is now their favorite day of the month. They recently, for example, received their 6th crate and had a great time building a wooden crane and making their own color-changing slime. Don't you want to discover and play with color-changing
totally
slime,
do.
right?
Yes.
They even gifted an individual crate to their neighbors who made their own paper dolls.
Wow.
So this year, encourage your children to be innovative, creative thinkers, and give them the tools to learn new skills, build new experiences, and make new connections to the broader world. Redefine learning with play. Explore hands-on projects that build confidence, creativity, and critical thinking skills all year long. Get 50% off your first month plus free shipping on any crate line with code Typology at KiwiCo.com. That's 50% off your first month at KiwiCo, KiwiCo.com, promo code Typology.
And I think this is kind of on the opposite end of that. I feel like one of the problems with 7s, and I see this in both Nathan's and my own life, is that we are Renaissance people. We can kind of do most of what you'd throw at us, and that can lead to just you always have so many options. And so I think one of the things that's helpful, or that would be helpful with parents, is teach your 7s how when to say yes and how to say no, how to evaluate what is the possibility worth saying yes to. Because my impulse is always just to do everything. And I can imagine, I remember when I was in high school, I really wanted a job. And I was like, even this really boring job could be so fun. Imagine, it would be great. You'd meet people, you would make money. And I just kind of have the capacity to imagine the good in almost anything. And so, and that's a great, wonderful, exciting thing and makes me good at a lot of things. But it can also mean that you can say yes to way too much.
I remember my therapist, Joy, he once said that intuitives make terrible investors because they see the good in everything, even in places they shouldn't. They see the possibility in everything. So on the flip side of what I said, I completely agree. I think that let them explore, but also help them focus their energy into things that have the most possibility for good.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who has a 7 son who developed a gambling problem. And she said that one time he said to her, in a time of crisis, he said, "I never saw a hand I didn't think was a winner."
Interesting.
And that's that kind of, I call that, that's toxic positivity. And sevens have to be careful of that sometimes positivity can have a toxic quality to it, right? A self-destructive quality to it that they have to, be vigilant about and to make sure that they don't fall prey to their own kind of delusional optimism about life. Yeah. I also have a 7 son. And I'll brag on him for a little bit. He goes to Brown University, just is graduating now. And it worked out in some ways to be a great place for him because there are no course requirements. So it's just one big buffet. Like you don't have to do, awesome. Like you just go and you're like, I remember his first semester at school, Anthony, I said, well, what's your favorite course right now? He goes, Atlantic Pirates. And I said, you're taking a course on Atlantic Pirates. And he started going into, I'm learning about the knots and the boats and what pirates did and, on and on and on, but at a deep academic level, right? So currents and things like that and why pirates did this. And I said, $70,000 Atlantic Pirates. I'm paying for it. But for a 7.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, but for a 7, it was heaven. Yeah. And it was also hell. And it was also hell.
Interesting.
Because where he has learned now, and my kids all know the Enneagram. He's 24 now. And what they've learned and what he's now learning through experience is how much he needs structure.
Yeah.
Like he has to have structure. If he doesn't, that freewheeling mind runs all over the place. And he never finds he overruns the banks of his own river, and it's just, and so he's learning that now as he's, that's the gift of the Enneagram. The gift of self-awareness is like, it's just going to save you time. He's not going to learn that now at 30. He can know it now. And that's,
I learned at 30. I learned rhythm and the importance of structure at 30 and I'm still learning it, but yeah, absolutely.
And of course, being in a PhD program, and of course, as a scholar, you have to hunker down and get focused.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I know it's different in the US, but the UK PhD programs are you do have to hunker down, but they're very unstructured. They kind of just say, you send in a proposal, they say, good, you read with an advisor and they set you loose. And I really struggled the first year because I would just end up reading. I read a whole bunch of books that I loved, but I would just get really into books that I didn't actually need to read for my PhD. And I'd be like, great, I've read everything that Alistair McIntyre wrote. That doesn't really have anything to do with my PhD. And the thing that really helped me was that in my second year, I was living in Oxford. And there was this thing called the scriptorium where you would go in the morning, they'd have morning prayer. Everybody had to sit around and say what you wanted to get done that day. You'd work for an hour and a half, they give you coffee. You work for an hour and a half, they give you lunch. Work for an hour and a half, coffee. And just having that 3 days a week where I would go and have structured time. I wrote like 60% of my thesis just because I had that structure. And it had to be a structure that was outside of me, that I wasn't just internally generating.
Yes.
Do you know what's helped me is I've realized I don't do well with schedules, right? I don't do well with, at 10:30 you're doing this, at, schedules always make me feel constrained and tied in. And the day has no mystery or excitement in it, or life or week or whatever it is. But what it has helped me a lot, and, again, this is a learning journey, I'm still learning it, but I don't need a schedule, but I do need a checklist. And what that because I'm an actor, an author, and a podcaster, and I have my own schedule. I make it, and if I'm not careful, like Joy was saying, you have all this free time that you are the master of your own fate. And a lot of times I played 6 hours of video games, didn't get a lot done today, even though I have all these big dreams. But so the checklist has always really helped me. It's like if I can start my day knowing at the end of it I want to have all this done, then I can play 6 hours of video games, even as long as I get everything I need done in that one last hour. But that gives me the freedom to live in my personality the way I do, and it was made to, but also it pulls me along and it pulls me forward and gives me the practical steps that every day I'm making progress in my life. So checklist versus schedule has really helped. That concept has really helped me a lot.
Yes. the passion, of course, of the 7 is gluttony, and meaning that they cannot possibly cram enough fun, excitement, adventures, escapades, ideas, fascinating conversations, books, everything. They just can't get enough. And so they're cursed with the more, dilemma. And their antidotal virtue, the virtue supposedly, but one of, I think, several virtues that they have to really cultivate is sobriety. And sobriety meaning really focused attention on a singular goal, right? Like it's like for you to do a PhD, right? It's a wonderful thing for a 7 to be able to work their way through, undergrad, master's level work, then PhD work. It's like that requires a lot of singular focus and topically a lot of singular focus. And that's a very healthy thing for a 7 to stay the course. Don't get dragged off point. Finish what you start. I bet you there's a lot of, 7s who did all their coursework for their PhD and never got to the thesis because something more interesting came along that got their attention, and off they went, chasing that, So singular focus, long leashes, give them long leashes, but keep them on a leash, right? They need a leash, but give them a lot of lead. Right, to investigate.
See a way to put it, absolutely.
If you put too short a lead on a 7, you'll run into a lot of resistance and a lot of pullback because 7s hate people who shut down their options and they don't like limitations imposed on them.
Yeah.
Oh, Joy, you're making a face.
No, I was just having a self-awareness moment.
They do not like people who try to place limitations on them at all.
And, I was diagnosed with ODD, which is, I don't know if you know this, but it's oppositional defiance disorder as a kid.
Yes.
And, I highly believe in diagnoses and mental illness and all this, but I always question that one. I'm like, do I have ODD or am I just... Is that just my personality? Yeah. Well, and that's a whole other thing about these personality talks and the diagnosis is part of my personality goes, I'm not a 7. You can't tell me I'm a 7 because a 7 boxes me in. It tells me what I am. Like, no, I could be any of them at any time. I can switch to a 3 if I want to. And so it's interesting thinking about that's a very 7 reaction to being told you're a 7.
Yes.
And it's just like reflexive, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How dare you? You don't know that.
Yes.
I'm not.
Well,
I feel like you have a little bit of 8 in you too, Nathan, which has a little bit of
That's
that.
my wing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do those usually go together, 7 and 8?
No, the 7 with 6 is, very common. 7 with 8. Those are both the wings of the 7. Joy would not be as pugnacious as you are. She would
Heard that word before.
She would be more not as quick to. Let me put it this way: if the two of you were jumping off a cliff, a 30-foot cliff into the water, Nathan, you would be the first one off without asking how deep it is.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Joy
I've
would
literally done that.
Yes, and Joy would probably ask how deep it was first, and then she would be one of the first to go. But she has a little bit of the anxiety of the 6 till asking her the question in her mind. Well, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
You don't stop.
That's very accurate. And I was actually thinking when you were talking about how you cope with anxiety, I do storytelling, but in a different way than Nathan does, which is I think, what is the worst thing that could happen? And then I tell myself how I would make it out of that story. Okay. And I reconcile myself to it and move through it, which is still a form of storytelling. It's still a way of, it's still future oriented. It's still getting through it, but it's is it a more anxious way of dealing with it? Or it's just, I think, a more...
Yeah, I mean, I just think that a 7 with a 6 would be more likely to tap the brakes before a 7 with an 8 would. Just tap the brakes a little bit. The 8 just, foot to the floor.
Brakes aren't fun.
Brakes are not fun. No, you just keep your foot on the gas. Who needs a brake? Hey everybody, one of the lessons I've learned over the years is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute counseling session. And this is why some people can go to couples therapy or personal counseling for a long time and never really get anywhere. This is why I'm such a believer of intensive counseling and my friends at Restoring the Soul in Colorado, created by my longtime friend Michael Cusick to help couples or individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Now listen, if you can't wait months or years to get to the bottom of an issue or to experience breakthrough, you need to get in touch with my friend Michael and his extraordinary team of counselors at Restoring the Soul. If you're looking to get out of the rut you're in, but can't wait months or years, call Restoring the Soul today for a free consultation with Michael's staff. Call 303-932-9777 and learn how their intensive counseling process can help you. As a special bonus, just for Typology listeners, make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called 5 Ways Unaddressed Trauma May Be Derailing Your Relationships. So Anthony and I were laughing because here we are, we're talking to two sevens. You have a book. When does the book drop, or has it dropped?
It has.
It has.
It is out right now.
A fun fact is that the release date was shifted around because do you remember a few months ago when there was that ship that was stuck in
Suez Canal?
In the Suez Canal, that was it the Evergreen or something?
Yes.
Anyway, it got delayed because it was. I'm sure it wasn't on the Evergreen, but it was like in the thing. So we
in the canal.
We think that's kind of fun.
You are the second author today on the podcast who has recently had a book come out and talked about we may have a delay in the actual drop of the book because of paper shortages.
I've heard about this.
So there's paper problems, there's ink delays, there's gosh, we just bought a house and like back in February and I still don't have furniture. So anyway, that's how it's going out there in the world, So, all right, but it is not lost on us that two Enneagram 7s have written a book called The Clubhouse, Open the Door to Limitless Adventure.
Limitless
You
Adventure.
couldn't have made this more like cartoonishly accurate.
No. This is a caricature. I've never, it's like, your name is Joy. You've written a book about Open the Door to Limitless Adventure, The Clubhouse.
Let's get lost in our imagination.
Let's get lost in our imaginations, creativity and play. I mean, really, by the way, I'm encouraging everyone to buy this book, and here's why.
Yeah.
Nobody writes with more authority on the topic than two Enneagram 7s.
That's right. Yeah.
And this is biographical. This isn't just made up. This was literally written about me and my siblings. I was 10 years old and Joy helped me write this. And this is literally written about it. We would go out, Joy and I would go outside. We had this little clubhouse there in Colorado on top of the hill. And every day it would literally be limitless what this clubhouse could be. It was a castle. It was a spaceship. It was a wagon. It was a million different things because Joy and I liked working our imagination in these ways. And also in doing that as kids, it really did prepare us for the lives we led as adults. And we think this is valuable for any number, any person,
cool.
But this was something that we as 7s, I think, really naturally did together.
Wonderful. Tell us the arc. I mean, this is a children's book. Yes. And which means that it's also for adults.
That's right.
And,
Absolutely.
As all children's books are. Arc of the narrative. What is this story that gets told?
Well, the story is really, it's very simple. It is a girl and a boy. So the opening line, Nathan, what's the opening line?
Through wood and nails, a boy and girl play. What will the clubhouse be today?
And then throughout the whole story, the simple narrative is just a girl and a boy having these different adventures in a clubhouse through the power of their imagination. And the way it came about was actually Nathan wrote kind of the bones of this poem because it goes through, perhaps it'll be a wagon that you're riding through the wilderness, or maybe it'll be a submarine beneath the ocean depths. And he wrote kind of the bones of this when he was 9 or 10. And my dad found it on like a floppy disk. Didn't know this still existed, but it did.
That's how old I am.
Yeah. And so he sent it to Nathan, and then Nathan and I were like, oh, this would be so much fun. And I think part of it was we just so cherished those kind of blessedly boring, open-ended, playful afternoons. And, this is not against screens or anything, but, we feel like everything is so full. There's so much stimulation that we wanted to capture the joy of just open-ended play and imagination and delight. And so we did that through the story. So it's just a girl and boy. And on one page, it's a submarine. On one page, it's a castle. On one page, the stage. And the illustrator.
Yeah, it just goes on and on.
It goes on and on. So it's all the different things it could become. And the illustrator is just Joshua Timothy Taylor. It's just amazing. It's like a very whimsical Where's Waldo. So there's like tons and tons and tons of details on every page. And there's things you can find.
Fun.
And and our goal was really just to capture the joy of imagination and play, and how our creative capacities, our forward-thinking, imaginative capacities can transform any space into anything through storytelling. And then to inspire parents and kids to go do that, because we think it's so important for many reasons, for the pure fun of it, but also for cognitive development, for moral development. Being able to tell yourself a story and imagine yourself in stories is a part of how you figure out what it means to be good or brave or strong. And so anyway, that's kind of why we wrote the book, and that's the general arc.
It's wonderful.
I love that.
Isn't it? I mean that. I'm a fan of this book. I know I wrote it. I sound biased, but I literally, because I'm still a child, because that's what sevens are, I will pore over the pages and spend an hour just looking at the details and finding, by the way, there's a hidden dog and a hidden cat on every single page. And I had a blast spending a lot of time trying to find it. It really is so detailed. So I'm a grown-up who loves this children's book.
There's also a hidden bowl of macaroni on every page.
Oh, nice.
Eugene Peterson said imagination is the way to get inside the truth.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I love that.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true. And when we think about, I don't want to dive too deep into church stuff, but I think one of the greatest problems that the church has is it has no theology of imagination that's widely studied.
Amen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is a theology. I mean, people do write about theology and imagination, Joy, as you well know, but the church doesn't think about it. I mean, doesn't talk about it. Doesn't, we have a theology discussion about everything but imagination. Yeah. And actually the paucity of imagination is what so damages. And I think, I'm going to make a bold statement here that might get me into trouble. I think that's mostly a failure on the part of Protestants, because really the Catholic imagination, the sacramental imagination is such a rich topic in Catholic writing. And so, Joy's going like this. I could tell she wants to say something.
I'll send you my PhD when it's printed out.
I would love to read it.
Yeah.
I would love to read it because actually I've given a couple of lectures on the sacramental imagination, and just because I come from a Catholic background, and I did graduate work at Fordham, where that was a big piece of the conversation. And
I walk by it every day.
You do it?
Yeah, I live right in the one up by Lincoln Center. Yeah.
Oh yeah, right.
One of the campuses, yeah.
Yeah, I was in the Bronx. Sorry, but I took the train to the Bronx. But anyway, it was a great experience, and of course, I always sort of get despair a little bit of Protestant circles sometimes because of their unfamiliarity with some of these topics. Not to say none of them are, but I'm just saying there's a good number that. Let me put it this way: Main Street Protestants, how's that? Are unfamiliar with any conversation around deep discussions on what is imagination, how does it function, why is it important, etc.
Absolutely.
Well, and if I can just stick in a little, I'm slightly jet lagged, so the word's not coming to my brain.
Caveat.
I want to say something about it. We were talking about mystics earlier.
Yes.
And one of the mystics that I studied for my PhD, so the question of my PhD was kind of how does art form the spiritual life, or how can it form particularly the affective life? And one of the figures I researched a lot was Bonaventure. And a lot of the books about Bonaventure came from Fordham. And Bonaventure had there was this real impulse in the 12th century to cultivate the emotional and imaginative life. There was a sense that to be a really spiritual person, you needed to feel it deeply in your bones, and you needed to really identify with Jesus. And he, he was the head of the Franciscans, And one of his big kind of things was that he commissioned his priests to create images, poetry, music that help people engage their emotions and their imagination with faith, and kind of move from this kind of more intellectual capacity towards imagination and connection and affection. And anyway, I like Bonaventure a lot, and I think you're right. And I think there are reasons theologically that imagination is maybe a little bit less important from a.
But I also think it's such an
but it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
It's an aspect of God, though. I mean, in the very opening of Scripture, you see this creator, this artist who is imagining something and bringing it into being. Imagining is an aspect of God that I think is one of the main aspects of us being created in his image when we act it out. And so it seems like it's a little kid's book about, oh yeah, imagine, because we hear it tossed away like that all the time, right? Oh, imagination's great. And you see it in kids' contexts. But I think to imagine is something that when we take part in, we are acting in the image of God.
Absolutely. Well, we could just go off on this subject. I could go off on this subject for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Forget the Enneagram. Let's just talk about theology and imagination and art. Let's just spend a lot of time in that space. All right. So I want to encourage everybody to go out and get this new wonderful book, The Clubhouse, Open the Door to Limitless Adventure, written by two Enneagram 7s. Who better than Enneagram 7s to write this book? No one, he says. No one, he says. Guys, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having us. It's been
This
great.
has been so fun.
Yeah.
This has been so fun. And Ian, I hope this is okay, but I feel like given our conversation, I need to tell you that I am also coming out with a book. And the only reason I'm saying this is that the title is probably the most, it might be even more 7 than our title of our book.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's called Aggressively Happy.
Please tell me that's not true. You just made that up, didn't you?
I did not. You can go look at the Amazon page.
Oh my gosh.
Well, maybe you do have an 8-wing.
Aggressively happy.
Aggressively.
Oh my gosh. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, you can't, whenever people say to me, well, are you sure? And sometimes I have doubts about the Enneagram. You know what I mean? I spend a lot of time in it. But even still, there's a little part of me that's a little skeptical. And I'm always like, well, I don't know. I don't know. And then I have a conversation like this, and I'm like, you can't make it up. It's just so accurate. It's kind of accurate. You just can't make it up. All right. Well, there it is. Joy Clarkson, author of Aggressively Happy and The Clubhouse, Open the Door to Limitless Adventure. Nathan, the book Good Man and the book Different, both memoirs. We've loved having you on. Thank you so much. Again, people, The Clubhouse, Open the Door to Limitless Adventure. Run to your computer now. Go to Amazon. Buy the book. How's that, Anthony?
Yeah.
I mean, I just wanted to get it out there.
That's right.
Right?
That's good.
Thank you.
You bet. Everybody remember these words. May you have love. May you have joy. May you have peace. May you have healing. And may you have rest. Oh, and may you have fun.